Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new edition of Low Code Cafe, episode 76. Today, we have a very, very interesting topic. It's more of an advanced concept. In traditional development is quite popular about event-driven design patterns. And today, we'll see how we can get that done through low code. So I think it's a very interesting concept, especially for bigger system or system that span across multiple applications. So I'm looking forward to this one. But before that, let's welcome new people to this webinar. This is a community event that we are doing every Wednesday at the same time. And we get together as a team and with the community to discuss mainly technical topics, but also give a perspective on the product, on the upcoming releases. Sometimes we have guest speakers as well, so if you want to present an interesting topic to our community, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be thrilled to host you. This webinar is being recorded, and all past editions are on our YouTube channel, and they will show us some interesting tricks that we can do on YouTube channel as well. But make sure to visit, subscribe. There's 75 hours of video in just this webinar, and they are very good training videos. They cover a broad array of topics from simple ones like building an application from scratch to more complex ones like the one that will be presented today with design patterns for applications. So the agenda for today, I will be giving you a short update on the product roadmap, what's coming, and then we'll hear the stories from the trenches with Dale, our head of support, and he will be the one leading the biggest chunk of this meeting today, which is the event-driven design pattern. Engage with us at any moment, chat, Q&A, everything is on the table. Good. So let's jump straight to the product updates. So we published, so Tuesday had become our day for publishing hotfixes. And yesterday we published 3 new hotfixes. First one is we replaced tokens in short description in form fields. So they now should be working in that field as well. Also, there was a edge case, but quite useful, and we've identified on some of our systems where form fields were being disabled when a form would open another form in pop-up. So the forms inside the pop-up would be disabled if the action to open the form was in pre-init. So it was let's say a regression, a breaking change. So then we hotfixed it. As far as we know, nobody was affected on the support channel, but now we know that they never will. And finally, there was this issue with loading CSV from a text source, which we fixed, but then 2 additional issues were discovered, and we'll probably follow up with another hotfix to that, so it's still on the table. In terms of the upcoming release 119, we are still on schedule. It might still be delayed a couple of days because it got a bit bigger than we initially planned for, but feels like the right thing to do to postpone for a couple of days to get a good and quality release in place. The big objective, to remind you all, is to revamp the entity pages to be Bootstrap 5 and a new set of templates for the listing and for the form. And in this screenshot, we see just the listing, how much more modern it looks than what was before. And another reminder, we announced a lot of obsolete features while we did this transition, and those features, many of those features will be removed in 120. And actually, there's a table with obsolete features available on our learning site, on the documentation site, learn.planternet.com, and there you can see all affected features and plan in advance to migrate from them if you are still using it. Good. So that was the updates on my front. If there are any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
right, hello. Thank you for that. I am going to share my screen here, and I'm going to start today with putting some things on the clipboard. Sometimes I forget and put them on chat, and I just wanted to go through them real quickly. I think it's going to be useful. First of all, there's a link in there to Event-Driven Architecture, a Wikipedia article. And I think it explains very well where we're going today, and probably will finish up next week as well. So event-driven architecture is a good one. We also have the webinar feedback form, and I really would appreciate if you take a minute and click into that after the webinar today and kind of let me know what's, just respond back to how, what we're presenting and whether this is useful, whether it's presented well. Those kind of feedback really help. And then I'll mention too that you can register in advance for the low-code campfire. That's an event we hold on Fridays that is more of a meeting format. It's the same hour, and it's great because we see week by week where not only people from our team can help you, but people from with a broad range of experience can help you. And so show up, learn something, bring a problem. It's really a great one. So good. So my From the Trenches segment today is really less about TechNap and more about YouTube. We had a request on our YouTube channel with all these hours of video. Hey, we would like to see this in other languages. And I wasn't aware, but this is so incredibly easy. You just need to know how to do it. I haven't found a way to automatically do it. I'm still in search for that. But I just want to take, for example, the video that we posted last week about using the Q design pattern. So if I start push and play, you're going to hear me talking on that video, or Bogdan. So I've turned off the sound on that. But I wanted to point out there's just a couple of steps that's necessary to do that. One is that you need to turn on closed captioning, and you'll start seeing the English by default go by. And then in the settings, there is the subtitles are English auto-generated, but you can pick the auto-translate option and pick any language that you want from a broader list of options. And Google will go about starting to translate that immediately and put it in the language that you want. So anybody who would prefer to turn off the sound of my voice and put on Spanish, for example, you're welcome to do that. Out of curiosity, I was going to flip this auto-translate and scroll all the way down here to, I'm going to get a subject matter expert to weigh in. I'm going to pick Romanian. And Bogdan, if you could listen to this for just a second and tell me whether whether the translation's any good at all.
It's usually a very specific topic, like today. It's about implementing a queue pattern.
Yeah, I think except the last word, I think it was pretty good. So from experience, it's maybe 90–95% with these more let's say exotic languages. With the main languages, I would say it's pretty good.
Good. All right. So hopefully people can use that as an option for viewing our videos if you're not an English speaker or native English speaker. So cool. And that's all really I want to present today from the trenches. I hope you can benefit from that. So we move right on to hands-on low coding. We're going to talk about event-driven design patterns. The first thing I wanted to point to, and this is the article that I linked in the chat, event-driven architecture. These first few paragraphs, not a ton of reading, explains exactly where I went with building the proof of concept that you're going to see today. So you'll see it and hear me explain it. It's probably worth going back and taking a look at this if this is a topic of interest to you. So I'm going to set that aside. So let's just kind of talk about it a little bit. An introduction to event-driven architecture, the idea is that you have events that happen within your system and you have responses to those events. In a lot of what we show, we are more direct than that. We'll have a button people click the button and the actions that how it responds are connected directly to the button. And that's a real oversimplification, but that's one of the patterns that you'll see we use quite a bit. So event-driven architecture inserts a little disconnect in that and says that the event that happens is not directly connected to the response. So instead of putting the response right there, in that button, we might raise an event, and then other things can respond to the event, and any number of things can respond to the event. So you'll see it talked about in that article, loosely coupled. And so, why would you want to do that? Well, if you have, in that kind of an architecture, when the events you can add any number of events and then decide after the fact that whether you want to react to them. So for example, if you have a new client, when that happens, you can raise the event. Maybe something's looking at that, maybe nothing's looking at it, maybe 10 things are looking at it. It gives you the opportunity to add more things to the new client event after the fact, and you don't have to get into where that happened or anything. You just react to the event. And so this is exactly the pattern that we're going to put in today. Another benefit of it, as Bogdan alluded to, is the ability to have those events transmitted from one system to another. So if in your CRM system you create a new client, perhaps your billing system needs to know that you have a new client as well. So you can raise that event in another system. So in trying to figure out how to present this in an interesting way, it really breaks down into two parts. One, we've got to build an event-driven architecture, and two, we've got to hook into it and use it. And so I'm kind of going to go backwards today. In part one, I'm actually going to show you the event-driven architecture that I built, and then not develop it, but actually show it to you, and then hook an event into it so you can see the benefit of using it. And if that's of value to you, then I think we'll get to the second part next week. I don't think we'll have time for it today, which is actually building that event-driven architecture and showing how to do it. Just to kind of give you an idea, I spent about 4 hours in considering how to build this architecture and getting it done in Plantain App, which is to say, I think I continue to be impressed by the Plantain App product in that regard, being able to put content in and express it very clearly in the product and very quickly. So before we get too far in, I wanted to talk about some changes that have happened since our last meeting, because this is really just kind of a continuation of last week's session. So one of the things that I did is I rearranged the menu. The menu was getting a little messy, so I put all of our CRM things that I had that was demonstrating Q emails, I put them under a menu, so it was simplified. And then in the same way, we have our Q emails, the templates, and the actual emails that get generated are all under one menu. And then this new that I built, the event-driven architecture, all appears under one menu as well. With it, another change is that within our clients, I've added, let me bring that up, clients, we had names and email addresses, but I've added an account representative. This is a linked entity. So we can, because what I wanted to demonstrate today with the use case is we're going to send an email to the account representative when we get a new client. So I've added that concept. And then also we had a workflow last week that was to add a Q email template for an invoice. And so we built this last week. It has inputs that include what template you want to send, where text value of what it came from, and an invoice. In I've made a copy of that, and it's almost the same thing, but it's add a Q email template for a client. So instead of having the input be an invoice, it's a client. So it's the exact same thing. You might want to refer back to last week, but we have the ability then to send an email to a client without an invoice. So then, the other changes are I've created this event-driven architecture. We're going to cover that step by step in part 2. And then once I did that, again, going into our client area, I hooked into this event-driven architecture. And the way that I did that is in the form where we enter in a new client, in the add button. So that is where we're adding a new client. In the actions, I have executed this event-driven architecture to say that an event has occurred, and we're saying the event that occurs is CRM new client. So we're passing this workflow, CRM new client. We're passing it that there happens to be a primary entity involved, and my architecture supports passing one primary entity. And so we're passing the word client plus whatever new client ID gets created. So the event is going to know what client got created. And then we're not going to touch on it much today, but there's this payload concept, which says that you can pass any amount of data in JSON format into the event so that downstream events have lots and lots of context, but we're not even going to deal with that today. The only context we're going to pass is client and an entity ID. And then this is a comment that says, where did this thing come from? And so we'll see how this pops out later. But hooking in, building the system and adding in this, raising this event are the only changes that I've made to the application. So let's see, okay, so now let's take a look at how this works, right? So if I add a new client, and I'm a master of copy and paste here, I learned from Radu. I'm going to add a client C and put an email address. This is a fake Google email address that will actually come to my system with client C attached to it. And I'm going to say the account representative is Dale Warner. So we'll add that. You're going to see now that if we look at the emails that the system sends, that it has created a send welcome email to, and it's sent it to the address I just typed, and it says, welcome client C, and hi, we would like to welcome you as a client. All of this happened as a response to the event that was raised, create new client, or new client created. And so it's proof that the application has worked. So let's take a look at some of the parts of that. Within this event-driven architecture, I have messages, subscribers, and responses. So messages, this is the event that got raised. So just now, this CRM new client event got raised, and I say just now, here's the date and time that happened. It happened on the new client add form. There was no payload, and we discussed that. And it created entity number 9. So that corresponds with when we look on CRM clients, we see this new ID number 9 that got created. And so this event got raised. So part 1 of what we're doing is events get raised. And then from there, your application, those events are going to get handled, but you don't, when you raise that event, you don't know what's going to happen. You're just saying, hey, a new client got created. It's the responsibility of this event-driven architecture to figure out how to respond to that. And so there's a subscriber section that, as a low-code developer, you would use that would say, when a CRM new client event happens, what do? Well, this is all implemented through tokens, and there's a reason for that. It's very dynamic. So we run a token called EDA send the welcome message. We pass the message ID so that this workflow, this token and the workflow that's underneath it know what messages are involved. And also we pass it a subscriber response that it's supposed to, that it works with. And so we'll talk about the subscriber response. But the fact that this record is here in event subscribers means that it's going to try and run this token and process whatever that token is. Token can be a workflow, a razor token, database token, it doesn't matter. Any variety of content can be, that you can put under a token can be run. It's going to do them in order. So if there's multiple events, then it'll put them in order from highest priority to lowest priority. And then you can indicate whether or not something is active. So if there's a feature that's built into your system that's put in through event subscription, you can leave it there but turn it off if you don't want it to happen for a while, or if it's under development. We'll use that here in just a second. So that's the second part. We have messages, subscribers, and then the last thing is subscriber responses. So this mechanism automatically creates a pending response as soon as it tries, before it runs the token. And the token, if it wants to, is responsible for saying that it has completed the work and what it did with it. So this is just a way of recording that responses happened and that they happened as expected. So for event number 22, I hate to switch around on you, but I'm going to. So event 22 was raised, and for a subscription number 1, the result was that we sent a message to client number 9, and that happened today. And it happened within a second when it was created, when it was modified. And then we updated that this was complete and done. Okay, so that's what's been built and what you're going to get out of this. So I am going to, so we've demonstrated that. The hands-on part of today is that we're going to send an email to the account representative. We're going to add another email. We're not going to touch the button. We're just going to respond to the same event. We're going to add a response. We'll test it. And so that's where we hope to get to in the next 35 minutes or so. So the overview of what we have to do to make this happen, we need to figure out, determine for ourselves what event we want to respond to. Since we're going to be doing an email, we'll be adding a new email template to the Q email system. We will create a workflow that's actually going to do the work of sending out that template. We're going to create a token that represents that workflow because our EDA architecture relies on tokens. So we'll create a token of the workflow. That's a very easy thing to do. And then we'll add a subscription and it'll all work, hopefully. So with that, let's get started. And again, I am a big fan of the copy and paste method. So I've got this up on my other screen. And we'll be doing that. So the first thing is that we want to determine what event we're going to connect to. And the event is the CRM new client. You can see that any events that get raised stay in this event messages. And so, and anything can raise an event. So there is no list, there's no definitive list of events that can get raised. You can just see what events there are that have been raised. And so we know that we want to connect on to CRM new client. So this is all done by the letters actually matching. So CRM new client is what we're going to connect to. So that's step 1. We know what we're going to connect to. The next thing is that we're going to add a template that's going to respond to it. This may seem a little bit backwards out of order, but I want to have that template ready when I'm moving into the next phase. You can do it in any order it makes sense to you. So this is going to be a template called new client account representative. And within that, we have access to tokens like client name and email and account representative name and email. And so let's get that done. So we go to our Q email templates. Again, built last week. If you missed this, then you might want to watch episode 75. So I'm going to create a new template, and it's going to be called the new client account representative template. We're going to send it somewhere, and the place that we want to send it to is the we're going to send it to the account representative's email. That's coming out of the account representative table. We don't need any CC or BCC, but we are going to provide a subject. And so the subject in this case is Dale Warner. You have a new client, and we're going to give the client name, whatever that is. And then the body of this is going to be, hello, Dale Warner, you have a new client, and whatever the name is, please contact them at your earliest convenience. And let's add their email address at all of the tokens that are available in the client are made of in the client entity are made available to us in this mechanism, the Q email mechanism that we talked about last week. I like client communications. This is an account representative communication, so this has a slightly lower priority, and so according to our priorities from last week, this will go out not as fast as client communications if there's lots going on in the Q email engine. Okay, so that's step one. We've added a new template, and we'll want to take note that this is template ID 6 because we're calling these by ID. More advanced Q email, maybe we would call them by name, but right now we're calling them by ID, so we'll need 6. Great. So next step in our development is that we want to create a workflow. So this is the thing that's actually going to do the work. Whenever this event gets raised, we want to notify the account representative. So we're going to call this thing event-driven architecture, notify the account representative. It's going to have some inputs, an event message, the subscriber response. We'll talk about all these, but what it's going to do is it's going to read the data we need, create the Q email using template number 6, and then update the subscriber response. So let's develop that. This workflow, this is a new workflow, and I have already created namespace for these called event responses, so I'm going to choose that. And I'm going to give it a name right away. It's the EDA notify account representative. And the description is say what it is that we're going to do. And then, so let's look at the steps. The input this has, and again, I'm a fan of the copy and paste. I've got it over here on my other screen. This thing is going to get 2 standard inputs. One is the event message, and these standard inputs are coming from my event-driven architecture ID mechanism. So that is a entity in the form of an EDA message. So one thing it's going to get is a message. Let's take a look at that, EDA messages. So it gets the name of the event that got raised, any payload, who raised it. This becomes key, the entity that's connected to it. So we got a little bit of data. We'll be working with whoever the primary entity ID is. So that's what we're going to get as a result of the event message. The other one we're going to get is the event subscriber response. This is another entity, and it's of a type event subscriber response. And so this is the thing, let's take a look at one. The response is the record that's automatically created by this architecture, and it's going to give us what message it's connected to, the subscriber it's connected to, and you'll be, the idea is we're telling it where it's supposed to write down that it's completed and what it did. So this is where we're going to get our disposition. So so we're getting those two inputs, what event happened, where it's supposed to write down what it did. So now on to our process. The process isn't that hard. The first thing that we need to do is that we're going to read our client. So before even filling that in, why am I reading client? We got a message, but we don't know what client that's connected to yet. We have to actually read that record, and the record that we're going to read, the record is coming in, looks something like this, and it's going to have a primary entity ID of as part of the message that comes in. So in our processing, we need to read the client that's related to the event message. So here we go. So we'll see if we can configure that now. This then, and again, copy and paste, I'm going to grab the event message is what's coming in. And so the record that I want to read is event message : ID primary entity ID. So this this primary entity ID that came in, that is the client, I'm just going to assume that it's a client because I know it is, but I'm going to read whatever that is and get that related record, and we're going to output that as client. And so this is going to give us access to all things from the client entity. So we have that. The next thing that we're going to want to do is to add a email template for client. We want to pick the right one so it has the right inputs of what we're doing. So we're going to send, this is where we're going to send our item. It's the template that we want to send, remember, is number 6. So we send this template. So we'll pick 6. The source of this is the name, and just for usefulness, I'm going to just grab the name of our workflow here. This is going to provide a nice record of where this item happened. So it's going to be workflow representative, and then we're going to pass it the client ID. That's why we did the read a minute ago. We want to pass in a specific client to that email mechanism so that it knows what client it's supposed to write to. And so, we would get an email ID out of this, which we don't need. So we're going to not take an output field. And then finally, we're responsible for updating the EDA, partially update the subscriber response. So we are the subscriber, we are responding. What are we going to do? Well, the first thing we need to do is to say, which one are we updating? And so we'll go back to our inputs, and this is what's coming into us. So we will update the subscriber response ID. And what do we want to change? We are going to, partially updating, we'll pick what we're going to update. We're going to say that we have a status of complete because we did process this item, and that the message is that we sent in. Who did we send it to? Well, let's see. I'm going to cheat again. I've got this prepared. So we sent an email to the account representative for, and then we have the client name available to us. So we're just putting in that we've sent it to them. So this response is going to be updated with these two things. It's got a status and a message, save. And we're done. So once this gets called, once this gets invoked, we're going to get it's going to be invoked with the event that happened and the response that we're supposed to process. We read the client, generate an email, say that we did the work, done. So I am going to save that. And so we're on to our next step. We have done this inputs and process. The next thing we want to do, we have to have a token that can initiate that, because that's what this architecture requires. So we are going to create a token named notify account representative. And then this is a very easy thing to do. So we go to our tokens. I have a namespace called EDA. This is the one that we used in my demonstration earlier to send the welcome email. Now we're going to add a new token. It's going to be called notify the account representative. The definition of this is that it is we're going to run a workflow. The workflow is notify account representative. Very important here, don't pick a caching value. You want this to be 0. If we have caching involved, the token won't actually run. So we want every one of these tokens to run, has to have a value of 0. I'm going to click save and test, and this builds us the format. It didn't actually do anything because it passes these event message of value, event subscriber. It passes the input parameters and by default, but this is what we're going to use as our in our next step, because we're going to wire this newly created token into our subscription model. So let's move on to that next step. So we add the subscription. The subscription that we want to do is we're subscribing to the event CRM new client. So we go to our event-driven architecture, and we're going to go to our subscriptions, and we're going to create a new one. We're responding to CRM new client. So if it's anything else, if you want any other kind of event, you have to put in that name. The token that we want to do is this one I copied earlier, this EDA notify account representative. And I'm going to simplify here for just a minute. Because the calling messages are identical to one that's already done, rather than typing it, I'm going to copy and paste. So I'm going to remove that for just a second, and we'll come back to it. Actually, let's do it right now. So I'm going to get the same calling sequence. We're passing the event message, and it has the event ID and the subscriber response ID already part of it. So I can just borrow that and paste it in here. So, oops, I missed a parenthesis. Let's make sure my syntax is good. So it's going to call our new token. It's going to pass in the message ID. It's going to pass in the subscriber response ID. Oh man, I've got that all messed up. I better do that again, because I think I have the content messed up. I'm just going to take to the end of the line. Make sure I get this right. All right, that looks better. So we have our token that we want it to run automatically. We've got that built. And so let's go on and finish up what we're doing. This is so we can assign a priority to these things as well. When there is a list of events that happen, events that are being responded to, if you want things to happen in a particular order, you can apply a priority. Higher priority things are done first. And we're going to provide a status of active. So this thing is now operational. If it has any other status besides active, it won't run. So let's see where we are on our map. We've added our subscription, so now it's time to test. So let's test it. We go to CRM, same thing. We're going to add a client. So we will create a new client. It's going to be called client LCC 76. It has an email address of client LCC 76, and I'll be the account representative. That's how it will know to send the email to me. So when we add it, we should see the same result as we had before, but now an additional thing taking place. So let's look at it first from the EDA side. What happened? We still have, we got an event message that this just happened at 10:41, the primary ID client, that we got a new client event that happens here. A new client happened, and it was with an ID of 10. So if we go back to look at our clients, same way, we can see that number 10 was created. So it all, the event was raised correctly. And so now we look at the subscription responses, and we can see that in the same time frame, that it both sent an email to the account representative and it sent an email to the client. So this new thing that's connected to subscriber ID 4 wasn't happening before when we started today, but because of the work we just did, it happened. And again, just to take a look at our subscriptions, this new thing we added was number 4. So everything is nicely linked together. And so the event-driven architecture engine correctly recorded what it was that we're doing. Now let's take a look at the emails that got generated. So we don't really have I need a timestamp on here. Tell you what, that's worth a quick detour. We'll add a timestamp into the information. This is something that you'll typically want to do. You can say add fields and say that I want the created date as part of the data. And I like these formatted so we can see them really well. A little bit of overkill here. We're going to say that we want it to be a full date and time, a long string down to the second, and I want to see it in my time. So we'll say user time, save. Okay. So now we have the two things that happened at 10:41:45. These two emails happened. And so there was a email that went out to me as the account rep that says, hello, you have a new client. And there was an email that went out to the client that says, welcome. So this shows that we can hook multiple things into this event-driven architecture without actually having to go find the place in the code. You respond to the event, not the code. And then just for fun, if we were to look into our emails, we have this email that we actually received that says, hi, we'd like to welcome you as a client, and your account representative is Dale Warner. We go to this other email that Dale receives, and it says, you have a new client, and here's his email address. So we've responded to multiple events. So I kind of touched on one benefit here, which is we were able to, without going into the code, we were able to respond to the new client event with through the event being raised and the and you can hook anything to it. You can hook a process, like, you know, if you've just used some stock, you can say stock was used and then have it trigger a check to see if it's time to reorder kind of a thing, and everything. You can just raise events that get responded to. Another possibility that we could do is, let's say that we want to resend that new client communication. So we might easily be able to add a resend button so that those same events happen again if for some reason you want to trigger them. Very easy to do. So let's take a look again at how we raised the event. And by the way, I'm going to challenge you now. It's time for questions, because I'm going to finish a little bit early. I'd love to talk about this a little bit. if you have questions, it's time to post them, please, to the chat or to the Q&A. So I raised this event by looking at, I added this event. I raised that the new client event has occurred. If I want to put the same thing on a button, I'm going to do that. I'm going to copy this and then go and we'll add a button to our listing that says resend client communication or just resend. So I go to a button and I add an item button that says resend. And the event that it's going to do is the same event, except that I'm going to say that instead of it's coming from the new client add form, it's going to be saying that this is the new client list. You can, this is purely cosmetic, but it kind of will help you track where things are going. So otherwise, we're going to do the same thing. The ID we want to send is actually the ID that's in the listing, because that's the ID that's in this listing is the client ID. So we're sending it a client ID, but we're still raising the exact same event. So it's going to respond exactly the same way. So if we now want to resend this content, we can just click the button, it'll do the work. And if we take a look at our event messages, we can now see that at 10:48, there was this new client listing resend button was clicked against entity number 10. And if we look at our emails, we now see that we have, let's see, this is probably Google's grouping these together. So, but it resent the same things. If we were to look in our queue emails, you can see that at 10, here's the original ones that happened at 10:41, but now you can see that 10:48, these two emails happened again. So we reused the same events, reused the same subscriptions by raising the event somewhere else. Cool. So in part 2, my plan is that we'll do a quick review of what we talked about today, and then we'll actually implement the system. I'll show you exactly how to build all the different entities and the workflows that are behind it. And then to make it a little bit interesting, we'll actually do that on another system. I'll probably do it on the Campfire website, so that the Campfire website will have the event-driven architecture built into it. And then we will show too how we can create a channel to move events to flow between systems. So for example, this new CRM new client event will flow into Campfire. Campfire can react to that or not. I mean, the event will exist over there, and then it's up to doing this exact same work to hook in a subscription to say whether or not it will respond to it. Okay, so y'all are quiet. If there's anything, time to, if you have any questions about what I did today, we finished a few minutes early. And okay, now I'm going to get a review from the boss. How did I do today?
Yes, it's a very interesting topic. It's a bit complex to understand, but I think this is a very good example of how far can you go. And maybe I think the important conversation here will be the benefits of implementing such a complex architecture in the end, because me as, let's say, a user, a builder, we plant an app and with low code in general, I would ask, why not call the workflow directly, for example? You know, why go through all these loops? Why not call the workflow from the button? You know? So I guess that's worth a conversation, a deeper conversation, and I'm not sure if others feel the same. If there are any questions.
You're absolutely right. There is no I didn't handle that when I did the introduction. The idea is, my first response to that is that for simple systems, it's not worth it, right? The complexity that you build in, it's not worth it. As the systems grow more and more, rather than having to touch the individual areas of code and to understand, to have everything very deeply within the product, it's connected to something at a higher level that can be controlled. And I touched on that too with things like being able to activate or deactivate a subscription. And then there's the things that, the other kinds of benefits that you get out of it, again, as a big system, is that you see, you have a record of what events happen. So and how they were responded to, which gives you some metrics to go on. How's your system being used? What's the flow, things like that. So but you're right, it is a higher level topic.
Yep. I think one of the benefits that I saw right away, as let's say an experienced person building lots of systems during the time, is that you decoupled the front end from the business logic. So the person building the form would not be concerned with the business logic. They will not know what workflows to call for a button. They just know, oh, I'm creating a new client in this form. I'll raise this event, and I will let somebody else figure out what needs to happen. And that somebody else could be multiple people that do it over time, because these systems, they keep evolving, keep growing, the team keeps changing. So then this also creates, let's say, a contract between people that work on the system, that you raise that event, and then it's other people that implement what happens when a new client is generated. Because following on your example, maybe right now it's a pretty simple system, but next week we have so many customers and we set them up automatically. Now let's create a new event that sets their account in a different system, or sends them an order to the let's say production department to send them a welcome package. So you can do stuff like that, or you can do something like, oh, this is a promotion, we only send it to new customers this month. So then you turn on the subscriber and then you turn it off easily. So it creates an interesting pattern for a more dynamic system and more collaboration between various roles that build a system.
So expanding on that just a little bit, one of the things that I was interested in exploring was that in building more subscriptions to this, that you could easily indicate whether the subscription was to, by default, it's happening in response to the event, but it would be easy to add it to have a subscription that is going to be processed, let's say 60 minutes after the event. And so one benefit of that would be that, let's say a new client gets created, and one of the requirements is that that you have to fill in all of the phone numbers or provide some other demographic kind of information. This by setting up something that happens 60 minutes later, you can do the check to see, did the required extra work get done? If not, notify somebody. And so it's a built-in time lapse mechanism that you could implement. Very easy to do. I'm going to experiment more with that. Lots of things that you can do when you extract a layer higher than just direct coding, but it does add complexity.
Yep. So yeah, I think there's a natural tipping point. So when you have, like you have here, let's say one event with a couple of subscribers, the complexity to implement it is high. But when you have 100 events with a couple hundred subscribers, this is much less complex than maintaining an application that would have 100 buttons, let's say, with 200 workflows, yes. And figuring out which one is to call which.
The nice thing too is that that something like this could be implemented in a system after the fact. You don't get all of the benefit that you just mentioned, but as you hit that tipping point and you say, I'm not going to do more of the same anymore, you can add a few entities and a few workflows to a system to implement EDA, and then start doing new coding against events rather than old things. You can convert them or not, but they can coexist. You can still do things on buttons and then do events as well. Lots of good things. If you're interested in talking about this generally as a topic, we encourage you to join us on Campfire this week. We'll leave a few minutes to just kick this around a little bit. Benefits versus costs, and whether or not you would even consider doing something like this on your systems. So great. Let's see. I'm ready to sing us out here.
Yeah, I think it for me personally, but I'm a techie, so I might be biased. I'm an ex-developer, so to speak. For me, it was a very interesting topic, and seeing it done with low code, I think it's an amazing achievement. Of course, from what I saw, I think there's always things we could have done better as a platform to support these scenarios. But the fact that it's possible, I think it's an amazing feature, and I'm hoping that they'll manage to make you at least curious, look into this further, and hopefully make you more successful at building these kind of systems. Thanks, Dale, for putting everything in place. I'm looking forward to see the next one as well. And thanks everyone for attending. We'll be seeing each other again next week. Same day, same time. Bye, everyone.